Welcome to Turning the Tide. This is Candace, Salima, coming at you from the heart of the Rocky Mountains. And today we are speaking with a preparedness pro. Now, let me tell you, this gal is my friend, and she is the cat's pajamas. I am not kidding. Kellene Bishop is the go-to lady for just about everything in preparedness and self-defense. She is the Director of Training for Preparedness Pro, as well as a self-reliance consultant. She's also a professional copywriter and an award-winning marketer. Now, Kellene is recognized worldwide for being one of the top 3 marketers, which is huge in my opinion. And yes, I will be asking her for advice. And she and she also teaches a self-reliance course for women called Women of Caliber. And I got to participate with her on a television show, a reality show that was being shot. What's the network for that, Kellene? I can't remember.
That was National Geographic.
National Geographic, that's right, Nat Geo, if we're going to be hip and all. Anyway, Kellene, welcome to Turning the Tide.
Thank you.
Okay, you know, the reason I wanted to have you on is, obviously, as you well know, looking at the state of America and the world today, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of uncertainty, instability, and everything going on, and I wanted to help the Turning the Tide listeners to know how to start becoming prepared for this kind of mess. And granted, it is something we should always be doing. It is something we should just say, you know what, life's going to happen, and as such, what happens if I can't pay the bills? I need to have food, I need to have toilet paper, I need to have shampoo, I need to have deodorant. Please make sure you stock deodorant, and all those kinds of things. But people don't think that way, do they, Kellene?
Not on a regular basis. And it's not necessarily their doing. We live in a society that is, fast food, overnight, instant funds, all that kind of stuff. That's our world. And so as a result, there's so many demographics out there, just as a demographic as a whole, that don't think about tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's the reason that you're on today, Kellene. And I know you are just at the top of just about everything you do. You are one of the smartest women I know and one of the most talented, and I'm not just kissing up, I swear. You really, really are, Kellene. It's been a source of great comfort to me that when I'm in a situation where I can't find the information anywhere, I know I can go to you and you've got the answer. So far, you have not let me down. So I appreciate it very much.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely not. You've had one of the top shows on Blog Talk Radio for a long time called the Prepared Pro Radio Show.
Yeah, the Preparedness Pro Radio Show.
Yeah, and tell me what's going on with that before we move into the meat of what we're talking about.
Well, we did that for about a year, and I really wanted to get my feet wet with radio, so to speak, on someone else's network. Learn from their expertise and learn what I needed to know. Preparedness Pro, we're positioning it to be the biggest influence out there in the world of preparedness, because we want to mitigate the panicky doom and gloom message that I simply just cannot subscribe to.
Yes.
And as such, we are doing some huge revamping on the site. I will be doing my own show starting the 1st of December. We won't just be doing radio, but on a regular basis, we'll also be offering Preparedness Pro TV, where we do evaluations in people's homes, keeping their identity anonymous. And we essentially do a lifestyle makeover, if you will, to create more self-reliant lives.
Okay, you can't come to my house. Then everyone would know how very unprepared I am. I'm a little here and I'm a little there and I've got this and I've got that. But I was thinking over the weekend. By the way, everyone, I have bronchitis, and so just excuse the huskiness of the voice. Over the weekend, I was in Colorado helping my mother. She was just about at her wits' end with her computer and everything that was going on. She lives on a farm, and she's thinking of selling it. So I went down to help her with everything, and I was thinking to myself, I have got to get my life out of control. I've got to quit going from one crisis to the next. I have got to calm down, assess the situation in my home, and fix it. Tell me how many people are in my position, Kellene?
Well, I'd say 9.5 people out of 10.
Okay, I'm feeling a little better. Part of the crowd, except I like to not be part of the crowd, so I got to fix
that.
Okay. So before we break it down into preparing for natural disasters and preparing for financial disasters, and see, for my husband and I, because of his health, we have hit financial disasters over and over and over. And just as a side note, our food storage that I have always been really faithful with building back up, has saved our bacon, several times. And we have gone through that food storage through the down times. And fortunately, the downtime did not exist longer than the length of the food storage. But we literally have gone through that 2-year food storage 3 times in 16 years of marriage because of financial downtimes due to his medical condition. And it has been huge for us to be prepared in a lot of ways. And so I wanted to have us talk about that, because that is one of the biggest emergencies or situations people are facing now. But tell us about your 10 principles of preparedness before we go down into break down into those 2 categories.
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to, because it doesn't matter what it is that you get hit with. The 10 principles of preparedness, you plug those into every scenario. And basically what it is, most of the people, when they ask me what I'm due, I share with them, I'm the Preparedness Pro. I teach independence, self-reliance, and preparedness for everyday events. And they'll look at me kind of like, I have 4 heads, and then being kind and wanting to create a rapport, they'll go, oh, yeah, I have wheat. And that's really all they think of when they...
Do they know what to do with the wheat?
That's a whole other story. But that's what most people think of when they think about preparedness, and that's unfortunate. It's so much more. And as a matter of fact, there are 10 principles of preparedness in order of prioritization. Out of 10 principles, food, not food storage, but food is number 8. So in other words, there's 7 other principles that are being ignored that are more critical, that they're going to run into and be confronted with first, and any type of curveball that's thrown at them in life. And so my goal...
That's true. That is so true, I can tell you. Because when my husband was first diagnosed, my husband and I had a savings. We had paid our debt down. We only had $3,000 left in debt out of $75,000. We were just plugging right along, doing everything. And then he was diagnosed with kidney failure. And I'm going to tell you, Kellene, within 6 months, we were completely wiped out.
I bet. And see, if you look at that scenario, that's not a financial crisis. Before it was a financial crisis, it was a medical crisis.
Yes.
And that's why medical preparedness is the 4th principle. And believe it or not, financial preparedness is the 9th. And the thing is if you can plug into the 10 principles and prioritize properly, then everything gets put in its proper order, your focus, your resources, your energy, and everything takes care of itself in terms of the other principles.
Tell us, I know they can go to your website, preparednesspro.com, and get all of this information, but can you give us some highlights of, say, the top 3 that, because clearly when we were going through this situation, I had gone with the standard being prepared, and it wasn't enough. It just, as hardworking as we were and as wise as we thought we were being, it wasn't enough, Kellene. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the first 3. The first 3, some people are going to hear this and go, well, duh. And I hope they do. I hope they don't go, oh, no, that's too hard. Okay, so first and foremost is going to be your core values and belief system. We call that your spiritual preparedness. And the reason being, let's say you get into a car accident. And I talk to people over and over again. What did you think just before you hit that other car and you knew it was going to be bad, or just before you went off the road? And no one's thinking, oh, my gosh, I better call Domino's and have a pizza delivered. Everyone's thinking family. Did I make sure that my spouse knows that I love them today? What was my last words? Will my kids be taken care of? It's about their core values, what's really important to them in their life. And that comes to the surface whether you want it to or not, whether you're ready or not. And the difference is someone who has continued to strengthen their values and their belief system, is that spiritual level of preparedness will carry you through all the other 9 principles, or it will be this gaping hole in your life, and you're going to flounder at all the other 9 principles.
Kellene, I'm gonna tell people how strongly I agree with that. If you do not have the strong inner core, which can only come through strong spiritual foundations, you will be crushed by life. I don't see how you can survive life without those core values. My husband and I, we went to church, and they decided to have a specialist come in and teach all the men and women in church about financial preparedness. And then they went through the key stressors, the 3 key stressors that cause people to divorce. And my husband and I looked at each other and laughed, because we not only had those 3 key stressors, they were way off the charts.
I bet.
But we held strong, because we know this isn't it.
Well, the thing is that people are like, well, how do I store up for that? Well, you make those core values and belief systems more than just a Christmas and Easter event in your life. And again, I'm not talking about a particular religion. I'm talking about having the courage of your convictions, finding out what those convictions are, and then strengthening them. If a person says, well, let's say a person says, well, I believe in God. Well, what do you do to strengthen that relationship with God then? Or if a person says, I'm a Buddhist, okay, what do you do to strengthen that relationship? Because no matter what happens, whether it's a serious disaster such as an earthquake followed by a tsunami, or whether it's, guess what, you're laid off from work, you will have to go to that core. And if you have not strengthened it on a consistent basis, this is not something we can do where, you can't do your prayers to Buddha overnight and then have enough spiritual strength to get you through a whole year. It just doesn't work that way. If it's not something you're consistently nurturing, then you will falter through the other aspects of life and through the other principles of preparedness.
Yes. You know what? She is absolutely right, people. I have to tell you, I cannot stress strongly enough how critical this is. I look back at the 16 years of marriage that my husband and I have had, and I know, Kellene, that if we had not had that first principle of preparedness that you have completely under control, that it was every part of our lives, not something new, not something we decided, oh my gosh, life's bad, I better check with God. This was something that was in the good times and the bad times. It was our core values of, we believe in the bonds of marriage. We believe that we made this covenant with each other for life. In other words, for good and for bad. And because that was at the core of who we were, it was never a question of when we hit our toughest times that we were going to divorce. We were going to give up. We were going to walk away and say, this is just too hard. I can't do this. That was never crossed our minds. And I credit that, Kellene, 100% to the core of who both of us are, inside of us, what makes us tick.
Here's a perfect example. I have a very dear friend who was 12 years old when the Armenian earthquake hit, and she wasn't even in the so-called worst area. The worst area was 100% demolished. Her area was only 75 to 80% demolished, but it was still awful. She lived without running water, electricity, heat, in the traditional sense, for 13 years. There was horrific things that took place, and yet her mother still insisted on raising her daughters with a Christian belief, and she raised these girls to be ladies. And you can imagine in that type of environment how easy it would be, especially when there's no food. There's a black market of what food does get donated humanitarian. Otherwise, you're stuck with these piddly donations of wheat that makes you gag just because of the smell. I mean, there were so many reasons where this mother and these kids could justify unacceptable behavior, immoral behavior. But because of this mother's core value and core belief system, she raised wonderful daughters. They were refined, they were polite, they were kind, they contributed to the rest of society, and as a result, it just shows that number one principle of preparedness, how valuable that is. It's interesting to note that my friend, she went on to learn English as fast as possible and ultimately ended up teaching English, and it was because of her ability to teach English that she was able to support her family. graduate, and then she ended up being over here in the U.S. And bringing her mother over here as well. I mean, it's just horrific things that they went through. But that just goes to show it was all about, they had nothing else. I mean, their bed was up against wallpapers, what they used for their walls. We're talking Armenia, folks. You might as well be in Alaska in the wintertime. And they would see the black mold and guck on their walls and on their blankets. They would wring out the blankets from the rain or the melted snow. I mean, they had to sleep in that. You had nothing else other than your core value and belief system. And look at what they were able to do in spite of that.
Yes, and that's the key. And that puts me in mind of World War II. Like I said, I was home with my mother over the weekend, and my father was was 4 years old when Hitler invaded, and he lived in Amsterdam. And I remember, because of the experiences my father had, I read The Hiding Place, and I read All But My Life, and all these other books, and the experiences, the horrific experiences they underwent 24/7, and they held strong because of who they were.
Yeah. If you look at every, incredible story in history, you can all of them get to the root of that principle of preparedness, that principle of self-reliance, their core values. I mean, even if you look in the Bible in Old Testament times, when the house of Israel left Egypt, they had everything you could possibly imagine. They had their family members, they had vessels of water, the Egyptians even threw gold and silver at them. I mean, they were sitting pretty. And yet when they got to the shore of the Red Sea, what crumbled? Oh my gosh, we're doomed, and blah blah blah. Wow, and even after the Red Sea's parted, they go across, and then they still whine some more on the other side. I mean, talk about really being deficient, and they certainly were in so many aspects. And then that was their downfall.
It really was. It really was their downfall. So I think people that we can understand how critical this first principle of Kellene Bishop's is, and that is simply you have got to have your core values, your core principles that drive you. And if you do not, it doesn't matter how prepared you are, it's not going to work. Am I right, Kellene?
I believe that 100%. One thing I do want to correct on, because I don't want to give a misperception, is, I mean, these I'm the only one teaching these principles. I'm the only one that's verbalized these principles and put them together this way, but they're not my principles. They're truth. I mean, and that's why I can stand up there and say, here's what they are, and they go in this order, is because they're truth. They're irrefutable. I've done classes on the 10 principles over and over again and asked the audience, do you think anything's missing? Would you want to argue with me a little bit on what order things are in? Argue is a strong word, but and then they keep standing the test of that speculation and of actual practice.
And time.
Yes.
Absolutely. So what is the second principle? We have about 9 minutes left in this segment before we take a break. So what's the second principle?
The second one is going to be your mental preparedness. And I'm not talking about, psyching yourself out and going, woohoo, we're going to get this done. It's not your attitude. It's your knowledge, and it's your mental fortitude, and that's covered in that area. So, for example, if we were to have a massive power outage in the U.S., there would be a domino effect, and the entire U.S. would go black for about 3.5 years. That's how long it would take to get that infrastructure, under ideal circumstances, back online. And so without power, you'd be thrown back into the 18th century. And look at what we don't have knowledge-wise today. I mean, so many people, we don't even do home ec in school anymore. If it's not a microwave, it's not cooking to so many people. But what about something like steam capabilities, utilizing steam, or making shoes? We don't make our own shoes here in the U.S. We don't have those skilled cobblers, so to speak. Just the regular everyday knowledge to function in your life in the absence of electricity can be very daunting. So constantly acquiring knowledge, skill, and confidence helps to build your mental fortitude. But there's also a level of that mental fortitude that's necessary that says, okay, this is rough, but I'm going to get through it regardless. that obviously is nurtured by that first principle. And then you come into the second principle. And that's what I spend the majority of my time doing is mental preparedness. Every single year I have a goal of something that I want to master, something new I want to master. And I get to build on that every year. And it's skill set. It's maybe making bread like I did one year. And now I make an awesome kick-butt bread. I absolutely love it, and so do other people. In fact, we have one gal win a blue ribbon with my bread recipe in Iowa this summer.
Nice. Yeah, I love homemade bread. I got to tell you.
Divine.
People, you don't know how to make homemade bread, you got to learn, because I have my recipe on my website too, and it is so heavenly. There is nothing better than the homemade bread coming out of the oven, slicing into it, slathering it with butter and honey, and oh my gosh, I think I need to go make some bread. Guess what I'm going to do when we're done?
You got to have homemade bread and chocolate. Those are the two primary food groups.
Homemade bread and chocolate.
Don't worry.
I'm going to have to agree.
Have to preserve their chocolate for 10 years too, but the key is not knowing where you put it, okay?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Remember, it needs to be dark chocolate, so you've got the healthy aspects.
It all goes down the same way. It's divine. But so that's what mental preparedness is, and your mental fortitude. So in that area comes your education. How many of us are prepared to educate our own children? I mean, shock at the thought, right? But what if what if there was that breakdown and we didn't have the public education? That's a whole other topic I won't even broach there, Candace. But
we could go there forever.
We would. That'll be another show.
Yes.
The point is there's so many skills that we take for granted that we would do good to develop. For example, if we are thrown back into the 18th century, how relevant will the people who are vice presidents of software development or vice presidents of engineering or whatever, how relevant will those skill sets be?
I have to tell you, Kellene, if they haven't read your 10 Principles of Preparedness, those people are going to be in trouble.
They are. They are, and they need to make themselves relevant in any scenario. You may have a marketing degree, and you may be the best marketer in the world. That may not do you much good if you are if you're now in a position where you have to feed your family because you know how to do a skill for someone else that they don't. Well, let's see. I can market your homemade bread, Candace.
Okay. I can get behind that.
Do they know how to do that without, Google and Facebook and Twitter, though?
No, they don't. And here, it's an interesting aspect. It's an interesting thing to look at in preparing ourselves. I think I must have read this when I was a little girl, but I do. You said you like to learn a new thing every year. I like to learn something new every day, and then I have a skill I like to learn every year. And I was telling my mother over the weekend, my phone, where my mother lives, the internet doesn't work on my phone. So she would say, gosh, I wonder, and I'd grab my phone to go to find the answer, and I was like, dang it. I need to start memorizing this stuff again because I am not always going to have the internet on my phone to go find the answer quickly. We have so much information at the tip of our fingers that we have forgotten how important it was to store that knowledge up in our brains. And I actually have a home library that has always been geared to that particular thing, that if it came to a situation where education was no longer available, I wanted to be able to have the books and the information necessary to educate the neighborhood children because I don't have children of my own. And I saved all my textbooks from school. As the years have gone by, I've kept an eye out, and I've picked up books on history and on math and psychology and all that kind of thing, all to the end that what if one day there was no school? What if I couldn't send my kids off? And I think it's really, really important. People like to scoff at books, and they like to say, oh, I can get them all on my iPod, I can get them all on my Kindle and kinds of things. But I got to tell you, there's nothing like a book on the shelf. Nothing.
With tabs all over the place and highlights and personal notes and aha moments. Yeah, you and I are definitely book hounds.
Oh, yes, we are. And if it was 18th century America, we'd be fine.
Yep, we would. We may not like it. I hate camping. Let's face it. 18th century may feel like camping, but I'm planning right now to be in comfort. I'm not planning to be miserable. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but that's what so many people, even those who are involved in preparedness, they're doing nothing more than planning to be miserable. Their idea of food storage, by the way, I hate those two words. I don't even believe in them. But their idea of food storage is ramen noodles, rice, macaroni and cheese, and beans. I'm like, you're not preparing to thrive. You're preparing to grumble. You're preparing to get sick of what the heck it is that you're going to eat.
Okay, I have to tell this story. I have to. When I was a little girl, we lived in Salt Lake City, and I am LDS. And so, the leadership of our church has always taught us to be prepared, be prepared, be prepared. I mean, that's been a mantra since long before I was born. Well, there was this lady next door to us who was not a member of our church, but she decided that was really good advice and that she should get a 2-year food storage. So she bought 2 freezers, and she filled one with cigarettes and one with fudgesicles and said she was good. She was done.
There is a world in which that would actually be accurate because she could get anything she wanted with either.
Good currency. You're right. You're right. No, for me, how I have done, and I know you don't like the word food storage, but I'm okay with it. What I have done,
and it's your show,
and it's my show. I can call it whatever I want. But what I have always done is I have wheat, yes, I have oats, yes, I have all that, but I also have grinders, and I actually know how to make bread. I know how to make things from scratch. I learned how to cook on a wood stove. We lived up on the top of a mountain in Montana when I became old enough to cook, and that's all we had because there was no power up there. And I learned how to cook. I learned how to bake on a wood stove, and I've never forgotten those skills. And there's the sun ovens and all these kinds of things. But for me, what I have done is everything that we eat every day, I made a list. I spent 1 week and went through everything. What were we using for toothpaste? What were we using every day? What did we use? And I made a list, and that became my list of things I needed to purchase.
Well, that's exactly how my husband and I prepare. Not that he's aware of anything in the kitchen, but anything else in the household, the fixing of this and that. He'll say, okay, now could I do this without power? What would be the ramifications be in this scenario? When I'm cooking, I just love to cook fabulous food. I'm totally a foodie. And
Me too.
I don't care if I'm making, some Italian dish or French dish or just a pot roast. I'm always asking myself, okay, now what can I do with this dish that I'm in love with to make it out of shelf-stable foods and to make it without electricity? And I'm sitting pretty because of that mindset. We've done that from the very first day of our marriage. We've looked at things that way. And as a result, some people's food storage may be beans and wheat and rice, whereas mine includes capers and ginger and, all kinds of fabulous things.
I've got spices, I have seasonings, I have everything. We need to take a break, Kellene. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. Go ahead and stretch your legs, and we'll pick this up on the other side.
Great.